Welcome back to another Gaming Memories video, and here we are playing the Need for Speed that was released by Electronic Arts in 1996. Originally this game had been released on previous consoles a year or two beforehand, and even on the likes of the PC, etc. And then it was obviously later ported onto the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. But each variation of the game obviously it had slightly differed in terms of the quality of the graphics and the play style, but essentially the game was essentially the same for the most part. Now I know, going back from when I first seen Need for Speed, I originally seen it actually being shown on an old games program that used to be on TV or years ago. It used to be on the likes of the afternoon kind of TV shows I used to watch after school when I was younger. I think it was about 8 or 9. I was 10 actually, and I remember actually seeing a load of games for all these other consoles, the likes of the Atari Jaguar and 3DO and so forth. And I remember them actually showcasing a load of games, and this was actually one of the games back in that time. I think it was actually, that was late 1994. And when I seen it, I was just like completely shocked by what I was seeing, because it was the first full 3D racing game that I'd actually ever seen being actually played on any type of console. Because at that time I didn't think it was possible, because you're so used to playing the likes of 2D games on the Sega Mega Drive, Master System, Super Nintendo and so forth. So to see something like that was pretty cool. But I didn't realise that it would get a later port onto consoles at that time. But in saying that, this actually isn't even the first Need for Speed game that I actually ever played. It was actually the third game. Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit was the first Need for Speed game I actually played, believe it or not. And I actually loved that game. So it was interesting to go back to play the previous titles once I actually got the chance. Now, I did have plenty of opportunities to even rent this game out over the time. I remember when we first got into the PlayStation, but most times when I went to rent it out, it was usually always gone, someone else had already taken it. Or what would usually happen is myself and my mates were always just obsessed with just wanting to play Resident Evil all the time. Because most weekends that was the game we'd usually always, if we were renting out the PlayStation, we'd always get Resident Evil and then one other game. That was usually how it happened. So we never actually really got to play Need for Speed, the first one, up until like a good while after that. But again, it was the third game in the series that I actually played, so going back to playing this one here was interesting. But I have to say, like, from what I have played of it, you can definitely see where they got the ideas for the future games in the series as well, and how it kind of developed, and it did get better as each variation went on. Well, apart from, say, the second game, but that's, I'm going to do a whole separate video on that at a later stage. It definitely, it's actually quite a good game. Like, it's really fast. It's really good setup of, or selection of cars available. But I will say it's very tough for a beginner coming into it. Chances of you actually winning a race are very slim. But again, as with a lot of these older type of games as well, they were easy enough to pick up and play, but they were difficult to master, because due to the sense of speed. And even with the likes of tracks, even though the tracks were very large and wide, but just the handling of the cars as well, because you're due to the high speed of the game, sometimes it would be difficult to master. So it was difficult to try and actually win races, but that's not to say that you didn't enjoy the experience anyway. Plus, the one advantage this game actually had was it was the first racing game pretty much that I'd seen where you could actually have like an in-car like cockpit view, where you could actually see the dashboard and the steering wheel, and you could actually see the steering wheel moving in real time as how you were controlling the car, which was pretty awesome. So it definitely added a lot more uniqueness to it as well. You definitely felt more involved with the whole racing aesthetic of it, and essentially those kind of ideas definitely led on to games in the future, even up to current titles as well, so that you can see those mechanics and those aesthetics in later games, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, you do have a really good selection of cars, and it's a really good selection of tracks as well, and you have, like, say, proper like lap based tracks, or even like sprint based tracks where you're just going from point A to point B and trying to do it in the quickest time while also trying to defeat other cars. And like again, like you see, you have a really good selection of 90s classic cars as well, which was awesome. Like, and so these are all type of cars that everybody would have went crazy about in the day, like, as well, which was pretty sweet. I do remember now this here game actually has a load of ported versions, especially on the PC. The version of it on the PC was actually re-released quite a few times. I do remember reading in the magazines where they would like different versions of it where they would add like extra features, maybe bump up the graphics. It actually had quite a few different variations over the years as they kept re-releasing it, because it was a very popular game back in those days, because there wasn't really many racing games out when this game was originally released that actually had access to licensed based cars, like with the full likenesses and so forth, even with the tracks and everything, like, so it was quite unique for its time. But again, it kind of paved the way for a lot of companies and game developers to open the doors for similar type of titles as the years went on. So this was one of the early adopters of that, which is really, really cool. But I suppose it's like anything else, it always has to start somewhere, so this was the game that definitely paved the way for a lot of that today. And the one cool thing I liked about this was also created by the same type of developers that created the Road Rash series as well. So you did feel kind of familiar with it to an extent. It had a varying likeness to the aesthetic of even Road Rash as well, in terms of the likes of the tracks and the layouts of the environments and stuff as well. So if you played Road Rash, you would have felt kind of at home in that sense. The only difference was you were driving cars instead of bikes. But again, like I said, it was difficult. As you can see here, the in-car view, the likenesses even as well of the likes of the dashes, of like the steering wheels, and the aesthetics as well were pretty much period correct for the cars at that time as well. So it was really, really good. So it's definitely an enjoyable experience, and you can see it in the later games that where they definitely tried to make them better, especially when it got to the likes of Need for Speed 3, Hot Pursuit. Again, I'll be doing future videos on all of the games in the series on the PlayStation as well, because they're all worthwhile talking about in their own sense, because you can even see like the difference in the graphical quality as well, and how the cars handled for each variation of the game. But even for this here game as well, like especially considering it was an early enough game in the PlayStation life cycle, the graphics were actually very, very good. Again, I love the whole aesthetic, especially with the likes of the tracks, the way you be out in the countryside, you did like views of the mountains that go off in the distance, you had different like trees and different kind of advertisements and so forth just hanging around the place, as you can see. So it was quite unique even for its time. And that was the one thing I loved about the PlayStation in general, was the fact is that they had all these elements that made the games look very, very realistic. It wasn't just the focus on the actual thing that you were doing, which say you were driving or whatever. Even the surroundings were just as important, and it definitely made it look very, very real, which was definitely really, really cool. So yeah, like I mentioned, these type of games as well, they are quite difficult. They're not in a way like beginner friendly to an extent. Once you actually do master them, you can get good results. But if you haven't played it for a while, or if you're just new to playing these type of games, they do present quite an adequate challenge. They can be quite difficult for people. But even at that, they are a really good game for just literally just for a casual play. Like, if you want to have a few races, regardless of whether you win or not, you can still have a bit of fun with them. That's the one thing I have to say I love about these old type of games. You didn't feel obliged to really kind of sit down and get stuck into it. You could if you wanted to, but if you wanted to just have a few casual games, you had that option to do that. Again, even for the likes of the cars and their likenesses and so forth, and even some really high-end cars. Back in the day, like, so you had a mixture of like American cars, Japanese cars as well, that are well known, especially in the classics from today, like throughout the 90s. So there were cars that I would have seen growing up and that I would have always I've loved as well myself. So to be able to actually get the chance to actually be able to drive these in a video game was awesome. And even for the graphics, like for an early enough PlayStation game, were actually quite good too, even in terms of like say some of the car models. Now I know they obviously got better as games got better over the PlayStation life cycle, but for early versions of games they were very good. But it just shows you what was actually to come, which was really, really cool. And again, this is just showing you another kind of like cockpit view of the likes of the Honda NSX. That's what's going back to the realism of the cars. It was period correct pretty much for the day, and the fact that you could see the steering wheel moving in real time as well, which was pretty neat as well. It just made you feel a lot more engaged with the experience of each playthrough that you had, which was at the time was very unique. And I know myself, it was one of the first games to really use this type of idea, and again it obviously paved the way for other games on future consoles and so forth to do the same thing. So it was really cool, and the fact that they were able to do it back then and actually get it to work, which was pretty sweet. So that's it for this video of Need for Speed. I will be doing future videos now of the sequels and so forth. I will be explaining my playthroughs and my experiences with them, and explain my memories and so forth of those games too, because they definitely are a worthwhile series, and it's still as strong today as it ever was. Like ongoing, like 20 plus years of Need for Speed, and they're still making sequels today, which is fantastic. It shows you how popular the franchise actually is. And it's great just to explore these kind of areas as well from the beginning and see where it's actually started and where it's actually gone to. So what are your memories of the Need for Speed franchise? What was the first game you actually played in the series? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on the video and hit that subscribe button, and also click the notification bell to be updated with future videos, as I will be dropping new future videos around memories and stuff of the games I've played over the years. And as always, make sure to keep those gaming memories alive.